Piermont's Paper Mill, Stories from the Factory. Gazing down from the aptly named Ash Street, the billows of steam and ash rise from the factory. It was the height of America's industrial age, and Piermont was in the thick of it. In 1901, Martin R. Williams erected the first paper mill. The rail yards on the pier, built in 1840 by the Erie Railroad, provided transportation for supplies in and out of the village. Fresh water, needed to produce paper, was supplied by the nearby Sparkill Creek. The Piermont Paper Company began production in 1902, and for 18 years the plant produced cardboard. Its principal customer was the Robert Gare Company. Back in 1864, Scottish-born entrepreneur and Civil War veteran Robert Gare started a small business making paper bags and boxes in Manhattan. Because cotton was scarce during the Civil War, flour and sugar were packaged in paper rather than cotton or burlap bags. Gare quickly became a leader in the paper goods industry as the world's first packaged food products began to appear on shelves. In 1879, after a worker accidentally cut through 20,000 paper seed bags, Gare developed a method to print, cut, and crease cardboard in a single operation, introducing the world's first affordable cardboard box. He could now produce in 2.5 hours what previously had taken a full day. Cardboard boxes became a hot item. Cigarette companies, Bloomingdale's, and Colgate were among his customers. Robert Gare's big break came when he produced the first boxes for the National Biscuit Company, also known as Nabisco, ushering in the birth of consumer packaging. Gare produced Wheaties boxes, the breakfast of champions, as well as egg cartons, in high demand with the growth of supermarkets after World War II. Cardboard boxes and paper fiber containers replaced bulky wooden crates and barrels. Manufacturers began to see the sides of boxes as valuable ad space to sell their brand. What's more, water-resistant paper bags, plates, and cups decreased foodborne illnesses, dramatically improving public health. No longer did the grocer scoop a product from an open barrel, nor were tin cups shared at public fountains. Biographer H. Allen Smith said of Gare, "He worked tirelessly, unaware that he was a leader in revolutionizing modern society." Sometimes referred to as Gareville, Robert Gare built a series of buildings in what is now referred to as Dumbo, the Dumbo area of Brooklyn. His company thrived. It was the Roaring '20s, and like other American capitalists, Robert Gare sought to maximize his profits. Gare purchased the Piermont Mill. By 1927, the plant was expanded so that paperboard and full-color printed boxes could be made in one location.
Old man Gare, who owned and operated the company, he needed other people to come with him. And my father and his friends, they came up here for a couple of days to look the place over, to see if they would come up here. And he moved up here in 1927.
The plant on the pier would become one of Gare's largest operations, employing 1,300 people, including much of Piermont's population. More than 85% of the yearly payroll of $1,250,000 went to people within 6 miles of the plant, and subsequently to local grocers, butchers, doctors, and banks.
The employees kept the business in Piermont going. Bars, restaurants, everything. That's payday, they'd go pay their bills off.
Yeah. Curtin Auto used to stay open at night. He was open before 8. And you could go by there at 11:30 and he'd still be pumping gas before he'd go home for the night. I just can't even imagine working that every day, and he was open 7 days a week.
In 1956, Gare sold the factories to Continental Can. Federal Paper Board bought the box factory and leased the paper mill in 1971. 2 years later, Federal subleased the mill to Clevepack. Throughout all these changes, the factory continued to make paper and boxes. To make a folding box, you must first have paperboard, and the principal ingredient was waste paper. Local John Schmall recalls watching freight trains bringing coal, bales of waste paper, and other supplies to the factory. Children growing up in Piermont often explored the paper bales for treasure.
In the bales, they would find jewelry and coins, but one of the things I do have that I've kept from childhood is a 1936 edition of a hard-covered book of Gone with the Wind.
James Koza remembers the paper that littered the streets.
There was a lot of paper litter throughout the village. It was not intentional. It was just the fact that it was an operation that a lot of stock was brought in. Or recyclable material was brought in. If it was a windy day, it would get caught and it would always blow around the village.
John Schmall recalls a ball field formed from discarded coal cinders. There was another use for those discarded cinders, as Fred describes.
And Piermont used that on their roads. They would have a dump truck, and there would be two guys in the back with shovels, and the truck would go along the road and the guys would throw a shovelful behind the truck. And that's how they salted the roads back in those days.
Then we were kids, Kinney Street, right up here behind the firehouse. They heavily cinder the bottom of the hill, they closed the street, and that was our sleigh riding hill for the winter. That's Ash Street, a steep hill coming out of the landing going up the hill. They used to cinder the bottom of that and block that off, and that was our sleigh riding hill.
The ash and soot from the factory permeated the air.
If the soot was blowing in the wrong direction, the laundry would get covered with the soot and have to be done again and hung out again. And like sheets, if they were out there, you could actually see black specks on them from the soot that had fallen and deposited on the laundry.
Despite the obvious negative footprint on the environment, the mill was ahead of its time in recycling paper. Forklifts carried it to the beater, where hot water was added and the waste paper was broken into pulp. The pulp was refined and fed into the wet end of the paper machine. Longer than a football field, weighing hundreds of tons, these machines were among the largest in the world. Wet paper pulp was dried with steam from its 92 rollers. Kevin Fagan recalls a contest to name the paper machine. Paper Tiger was the winning entry.
A lady in the office won. They had a sign made up. They hung it up on the top of the dryers, covered it with a sheet, and they pulled the string to drop the sheet. That machine didn't want to make paper. The paper broke, the sheet fell down in the pit underneath the dryers. Matter of fact, it didn't make paper until they took the sign off the machine.
The paperboard formed on the cylinders traveled at 300 feet per minute. "Keep it on the iron," workers would often yell to the incoming crew, warning them not to let the paper slip off the rollers. If it did, paper piled up in the pit, halting production. 250 tons of paperboard were made in 24 hours by two machines requiring 18 workers on a shift. Once started, they ran day and night.
They run every day, 24 hours a day steady. The only time the factory closed down was that 4th of July week. And they'd give everybody a vacation. All the mechanics would be nothing to do but replace parts, put new parts in to keep everything ready for running again. It was quite an operation.
John Schmall, like other villagers, remembers his blanket, made from discarded felt, from the machine's rollers.
They would wear out, all the Nyack would wear out, and then they would be no good, and they'd just throw them away. Our people would take them home, use them, or whatever.
The nice ones, when they send them out, and they'd have them cut blankets
made.
and they'd have them dyed. The village ambulance, for years and years and years, we opened up the back of the ambulance, and those blankets were in there, came off the paper machine.
Not only that, people had them home too. I mean, they were good, they were warm.
The plant generated its own electrical power.
Those two turbines actually had placards on them, bronze or brass plaques. They had originally came off of a naval ships.
John Schmoll was impressed the first time he saw the steam-driven flywheel. The power it produced turned the mill's main drive shaft.
If you parked your car in a parking lot and that big flywheel that's out there was running at the time, you could actually feel a car shake back and forth, back and forth.
The machine's final step was to cut the paperboard into sheets, which were brought to the box shop. The first stop there was the printing press. James Kozer recalls his summer job in the print department.
It was a lot of smell. One of the most dirty jobs was cleaning the press after a run was done, and we'd have to take the ink out, and we used to have to clean the rollers. The plates would come off, and then we'd have to clean the blankets, and it was just generally probably a 4 to 5 hour process if we knew that we'd have to start to clean up on our shifts, so we would routinely jam it up or do something to stop it so the next shift would get stuck with it. You'd be walking out at the end of your shift snickering at the guys, and they knew what you had done to them, and they'd get even with you another time.
To make a sheet into a folding carton, it was cut and creased, creating flaps, corners, and edges. At age 18, Laura Montesano began working at the factory. She describes the numerous steps in making a box.
This is one of the boxes we made for Jack Daniels. The bottom, which is blue craft foil, but here it has the perforations on it, so that was another operation. And then the way it would get folded, so that it's just something that's now a part of my life, that I never look at a box the same way.
Another machine folded and glued up to 75,000 cartons per hour. The stream of paper ripped through the machine as a blur. Most women worked in the egg safety department, named for the durable egg cartons made there. Laura recalls when the factory went on strike.
We lost a lot of business then. A lot of the companies couldn't wait because they didn't know when the strike was going to end.
Office workers were not part of the union. Laura remembers crossing the picket line.
They're walking with their signs, and they let you walk through it, but you did feel guilty about it. It was just the idea that they're picketing for a reason, and I'm going through that line. So it was my first-hand experience having to do the work that they did. How to put the egg cartons in the boxes and band them, and as they were coming up, pick up 5, put them this way, pick up another 5. Like Lucy and Ethel with the candy. That's exactly what it was like.
Fires were a big problem in the factory.
There were various types of fires. There were fires in the stockhouse, fires routinely on the box cars that used to bring the stock in. There were fires on trucks. There was a tremendous amount of weight from this paper sitting in there. There was very little ventilation, if any at all, and after a while they would actually spontaneously combust. I do remember some of these fires taking at least a day, sometimes 2, to fully extinguish.
One of the lights lit up, and when I answered it, it was somebody saying that there was a fire in the gravure department. The gravure department was where they had all their dyes and the solvents and stuff which could combust. When that happens, I'm supposed to pull the fire alarm and then answer each call to let people know where the fire was. I think in one breath I must have answered 50 calls. Fire in the gravure department, fire in the gravure department, fire in the gravure department, without even looking up, just putting that plug in the lights. And so then when Mary came back from her break, everything was calm and all the lights weren't lit up,
Many workers were also volunteer firemen.
Like Piermont had one fire engine, just one pumper and a small other truck. That was it. And Robert Gere would let them go fight fires when he was there, because he said, if I have a fire, I want everybody to show up.
The mill was a dangerous place to work. Enduring high levels of heat and noise, employees worked on machines demanding close attention. Steaming vats of pulp and hot glue vapors impacted air quality, with temperatures in the plant reaching 140 degrees. There were no air quality standards in those days.
It was hot.
Really hot.
And if you touch those dryers, you had,
Yeah.
it stung your back.
Your skin would be...
You have a blister like that. And hot, it was hot.
I went there to work that one night, and all I heard was banging and banging at me. I said, boy, by the time 7 o'clock in the morning came, I felt punchy. You know? I said, I can't take that job. I says, you gotta change, give me another job or I'm out of here. So he puts me in another job. And that was not much better than we're trying to.
Workers of different races and nationalities toiled side by side within the mill.
You work 7 days a week.
Where everybody worked together, helped each other out.
It was a big family. You know, everybody that worked there knew you, and you knew their families, and you seen them every day. In the time that I worked there, I seen the guys that I worked with more than I seen my own family.
Everybody knew everybody knew what everybody was doing, and everybody looked out for everybody.
For over 8 decades, the hulking, sprawling complex with its steam and smoke billowing stacks dominated the village landscape, employing many residents and enriching Piermont's tax base.
They paid all the taxes. I think our taxes when we first bought the house were like $400 a year. Now my taxes a month are more than my mortgage. You lived in Piermont, that's where you worked. And I was really happy when I got the job, and I made a good living. I think my hourly salary was like $9.47 an hour back
That's
then.
when you...
And that was really good money. Looking at it now, I kind of miss the factory, the camaraderie, the people you associated with, and watching the electricians climb the water tower, put up Christmas lights every year. The fire department's carnival, which was there for 63 or 64 years, they would provide the lighting, so we wouldn't have to pay for the electricity.
The mill closed in 1982, saddening many Piermonters. Without an industry to replace it, the buildings were torn down.
And they called us in and they said that they had decided they were going to close. I was devastated. You hear generations of people talk about the livelihood, and you thought the world was coming to an end. What am I going to do now?
Today, luxurious condos, art galleries, shops, and restaurants sit where smoke and noise from the paper factory once filled the air. Trendy weekend visitors sip coffee outside sidewalk cafes, replacing the blue-collar workers stopping at Hogan's Diner after their shift. The flywheel stubbornly remains as a symbol of Piermont's industrial past. Some say on stormy nights you can still hear the thunderous din of the plant's 25-cycle generator. But change is inevitable. Unlike many of our country's small factory towns, Piermont has evolved and survived. As we look to the future, we must remember the past and the hard-working people who built the village of Piermont and then stepped aside to make way for change.